Hello, everyone. We have another episode of the Intrepid Seller starting now. And today we have a very special guest here. We have Rick Watson. Rick, welcome to the show. Rick is, man, I don't know. I don't even know where to start to talk about Rick. There's so much. This guy, he's a former channel advisor employee, right? I think you started there and then you move on to Barnes and Noble, then Merchant Tree, and you're now the CEO of RMW Ecommerce Consults. Is that it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is amazing. You've been voicing over, very active actually on LinkedIn, voicing over about what's happening with Amazon e-commerce in general. I actually I follow you on LinkedIn as well. I'm not going to deny that. And by the way, if anyone wants, I highly recommend to follow Rick Watson as well, and to I think you also have a weekly newsletters that Rick,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
people should follow that as well. But I wanted to know, Rick, can you tell us a little bit about you? How did you become this person?
Yeah. So I kind of grew up. I grew up in New Orleans, and I went to college in Nashville at Vanderbilt for electrical engineering, computer science. So I was always kind of a software guy. Um,
Okay.
and I was at the same time in high school. I got involved on like the high school debate team, and then I did speech and debate in college as well. And so I always had this sort of side of me that was like very technology oriented. I finished my master's in electrical engineering, but I also enjoyed speaking. And I think a lot of that comes from my dad, who had a technical background, but also started his own business. So I think from early on, I got the idea that you don't have to be just one thing. You can be a few different things, and it actually could turn out to be more valuable as you kind of go through your career. So I, you know, obviously, I finished my master's in '98. I mean, the internet was really, you know, starting to go through the bubble.
Yeah.
Kind of the beginning of the bubble, the kind of the dot-com boom with, you know, GoTo and Ink2Me and Alta Vista and, this
Yeah.
start Google and Amazon, like all these things.
Exactly.
And I was introduced to the internet in '92, which was the first year I started college, and it was really a university thing. Like you could only get on at universities, and the general public really didn't have access to it. And so
So you certainly, I mean, given your history, you certainly remember the Millennium Bug that everyone was afraid of back then.
yeah, 100K. Yeah, how you think what the Y2K? Everyone is afraid that the
Yes.
computers were shut down.
Yeah, I
It's
remember that really well.
Yeah, I think I fixed some software for for Y2K as well for Channelizer, because we had started writing some of these stuff before Y2K even. Um, but kind of starting from software, I kind of fell into e-commerce where I joined a software company out of school called Stingray Software, which was a kind of a Microsoft developer platform, and it happened to be founded by the gentleman who went on to later found ChannelAdvisor. His name was Scott Wingo, who went up to
Boy.
ChannelAdvisor public. He's like extremely famous, much more famous than me, and more successful entrepreneur. But I happened to be involved with a really good group of people. There was a core group of 5 to 10 of us that had worked together at Stingray when Scott founded ChannelAdvisor, and he took a number of us over, and that was kind of my first taste of e-commerce. And really, the whole idea was, can we help eBay power sellers sell more online? eBay was the biggest e-commerce site online at the time, and it was just a monster. Just kept growing. And that's kind of when I fell in love with e-commerce, working with all these kind of small mom and pops, selling trading cards and beanie bag, like sorts of things online. And I think ChannelAdvisor really got its start when it found that people were selling like refurbished servers online. Um,
Right.
and like just big, if you like, IBM became a customer of ChannelAdvisor, and that was like really the start of a lot of the idea that you can make a living on a marketplace. Like, because even that idea, it wasn't a guarantee that that was ever going to happen. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely it. And I remember also Channel Advisor being back in my early days on e-commerce as well. When we talk about e-commerce, everyone talk about Channel Advisor, as in you need to be there. As in, if you want to grow on eBay, well, back then it was eBay, right? It's funny because things changed as well. That's also one thing that changed. Where now eBay nowadays is not as relevant, I'd say, as Amazon is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
No,
very
I
good
I I
story.
agree, and so, yeah, early on, eBay was growing, and then eBay started to hit some headwinds, and then Amazon seemed to have really nailed their formula of focusing on these buyers that didn't wanna wait around for the end of an auction, and I think eBay kind of had already branded themselves at that point. It was very hard to get out of that,
Yeah.
yard sale, flea market mentality that eBay grew up with, which they're frankly fantastic at, and they're very profitable business, but they're not what Amazon is, which is new in season merchandise, very broad assortment that they learned how to sell things beyond books and electronics, right? I mean,
Mhm.
'cause originally Amazon didn't sell everything.
That's true. I think the biggest shift between the two is the fact that, I mean, I love the auction based market, and I think it can be very profitable. Um, but I guess it was the fact that consumers, they wanted things now. I just don't want to wait until the end of it, or wait until the last. Watch the auction until the very last second. So you're bidding.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. You just want to, I just want to get the freaking thing. Just have it now. And yeah,
Oh,
I
it's
agree.
it's 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 crazy, and so kind of moved from the more technology side, writing software to help build the first versions of Channel Advisor, to more product management and the business side, kind of over my career as I go on. So I spent 10 years at Channel Advisor. When I started, there was 5 or 10 people there. When I finished, there were 350 people. So I got to see lots of different phases of a startup and how to build and scale teams at different levels, all within one company, which was just a tremendous experience, especially because I was around a lot of people that I really trusted and I was learning a lot from every day. So that was fun. Moved to New York City in 2011 to head up BarnesandNoble.com's third party marketplace. So kind of using my marketplace software experience on that side to really go more into a bit like more of a business role. Like really my kind of first true business role as a general manager was, how do you build a strategy for a new marketplace from scratch within a retailer? And one that was behind. Frankly, at that time, Amazon was already doing very well, and many years ahead. But really, just trying to focus on, in fact, I would hesitate to say that we had one of the first ideas of what a lot of people call a curated marketplace now, which is like, you don't try to build a marketplace for everything, because there's no point in that, because you're going to try to compete with Amazon. Just try to build in the categories that match your brand and that your consumers are looking for. And so that's really what we were trying to do at Barnes and Noble. And then as CEO of Merchant Tree, just got a lot more broad experience running sales and marketing teams and working with investors, raising money, selling, and end up selling the business, which taught me just a lot about how hard it is to sell a business. Um, you know, and it's just very stressful times.
Yeah.
Running a
I
business and
agree.
having people dependent on you. So
Mm.
that was that was interesting. Spent some time in the cross-border space at Pitney Bowes. They had just acquired Borderfree in 2015, which was a US-based uh, business where US sellers, mostly larger fashion and beauty brands, were selling into 100 markets around the world. And so this is my kind of first taste of supply chain and logistics, really. Um, and we were doing payment services as well as supply chain services for US sellers who only really knew how to sell into the US market. And so, before the show, we were talking about, you know, um, uh, European sellers coming to the US and vice versa.
Yeah.
And some of these cross border services are a good way to get some experience with the broader market, without, fully setting up a new corporate entity there, or
Yeah.
moving inventory there. Exactly. You can fail fast, you can learn about what's there, and then you can invest as you see kind of things that are growing. And then that kind of led to me starting the consulting business about a little over 3 years ago. And what I saw is that this is early 2019, so even before the pandemic, even though e-commerce was still like growing like crazy, and like Shopify was like really on a tear even before the pandemic. Um, there's still a lot of big brands that are I saw being left behind, and
Yeah.
their websites weren't very good, their experiences weren't very good, and they weren't really improving. And so I kinda saw that investors would see this as an opportunity, and there are a lot of leaders that need help with kind of their vision and strategy for how to take the next steps in their e-commerce and direct to consumer, whether it's digital commerce or through B2C or more B2B, from their customers, really helping them with planning and strategy and then executing, like helping select software vendors, helping, decide what their organization should look like.
Right. That that's a very interesting discussion, and I'm actually curious to hear more about that because it seems like in some points we have similar stories or similar
Mm.
experiences. And actually, I actually have the same insight that many brands, many industries is still they're lagging behind in terms of e-commerce. And I remember one of the jobs I had a job interview. I've always been like prior to the agency, I've always been an e-commerce manager. And one of the interviews I had, I actually was going to take over the e-commerce, which was going to start. And I asked them, "How come you guys never started this? I mean, we're in 2014, whatever it is." And it was like, "You guys are way behind. How come you never started this?" And like, "Your competitors are all there. They all have their own websites. They're selling for the websites. You're going to start it now." And I'm just curious why you never started this. And they're just like, it's yeah, that has never been our focus, and we don't have the knowledge. That's why we're hiring you." That's like, okay, I got the job. That's nice.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to
But
know
also
myself
like,
out of a job.
yeah. But it was also like a tremendous challenge, and personally, everywhere I've been, every company that I worked for, that e-commerce strategy wasn't there. So we had to structure everything from the ground up. Starting with like my first e-commerce job, or the first time I was the e-commerce manager, I actually had we had no automation whatsoever in the store. So the stock was counted manually and updated manually
Oh, wow.
in the ERP system. That's how they did it. And I was like, there's no way that we're going to run an e-commerce operation like this. So we had to look for ways to advertise. I think that's one of the points, or at the time where I came across Channel Advisor as well. I think we ended up having a course. This was in the UK, by the way.
Yeah.
And I think I had a conversation with Channel Advisor about this, and don't remember what happened. We didn't go with them. We go with someone else. Also can't remember who it was, but
Yeah.
anyways.
No, it's
And I was just wondering, did you find I mean, or even nowadays, do you still come across this type of companies that they need advice? They obviously they not just advice, but they need some help, or they seem completely clueless about what to do about their e-commerce or e-commerce strategy to do
um
that.
I think what you find is you find a lot of brands that have just been left behind. And
Mm.
I would say it's almost like they've been doing business the same way for so long, and they've been growing, that hasn't been a problem. And now they're seeing signs of things changing, where they're seeing significant competitors with significant percentages of their revenue being digital first. Not necessarily digital exclusively. It doesn't have to be sort of a D2C only brand, but investors are starting to take notice that these brands that have no digital connection to their customers are going to be a problem in future generations. And so I think
Mhm.
what's happening with these companies is that to me, the first thing that happens is that investors see an opportunity because the company is declining, because they're not taking advantage of, if e-commerce is growing faster than overall retail, and that happens year after year after year, then what happens is that they're not taking share and their competitors are. And so as an investor, that kind of triggers something in their minds where you're like, okay, there's something here to do. And likely if this one thing is a problem, there are probably other problems too. And usually they look under the covers and there's some things to improve. And that those investors put in a new CEO, a lot of times who've been at a company who has significant e-commerce revenue. They know how to do it, but their teams don't. And so what I find, especially with my consulting business, is I get hired by a CEO who's very forward thinking in the business, but the teams that are all that have history with the company do not and are not structured that way. They're structured to, I would say, reinforce their current sales plan. So there's a head of sales, who, I mean, it's not me if you've heard this before, views Amazon as just another retailer. And so same person who's selling to Home Depot, Lowe's, as the, whatever, or is selling to Amazon, even though Amazon is like 10 times more complicated than selling to a typical retailer.
Mhm.
Even from a first party point of view, even before you even get to talk about third party and advertising and fulfillment and all the things that make Amazon truly complex,
Mhm.
from that side. So I definitely see that there are brands that are still in early phases of transformation, even today.
Yeah. In my experience, we still come across some very large brands actually that they see some success on Amazon, but they're losing space on Amazon Marketplace, specifically for other digital native brands who are much smaller, but they're doing Amazon right or the right way, and they're outbidding any. They have a sales success that other major brands they because major brands sometimes they're just they're confident on their branding. And sometimes I've seen this already. I had a conversation with a few cosmetic brands, and they're thinking, no, but we're large enough. People know us. Why do we need to work with Amazon? Why do we need to do anything like maybe a storefront that is branded? That's about it. I was like, that's not the only thing. You're losing a lot of space here. Do you-
Yeah.
I think
I
there's a
I
lot.
definitely, yeah, I definitely find that, and you even find that they don't know what's happening on Amazon
Yep.
because they're ignoring it. They're not aware of their brand experience on Amazon, so they have competitors bidding on their own brand terms. And
Correct.
so even if you search for your brand on Amazon, they're not going to be on the first mobile swipe. They're
Yeah.
below the fold on their own terms. That's like a huge problem. And then second, I think a lot of people don't realize a few other things about Amazon. Number one is like it's increasingly pay to play. So even if you are there and you're not advertising, it's a challenge, to get visibility. And then second is brand mostly doesn't matter on Amazon. I mean, that's the harsh reality on Amazon is that most,
Exactly.
60, 80, I don't know, whatever you believe the number is, 60%, 70%, 80% of searches are unbranded on Amazon, which means people are just looking for solutions to problems like I'm going to a birthday party and I want a toy for a 3-year-old, who's a girl or a boy who likes outdoors. And that's what they type into the search. They're not looking for the Hasbro or whatever. They're just looking for something to show up with that's fun, that's inexpensive, that's $20, right? And that's really to me what Amazon is all about. And if it comes from, you know, some strange brand you've never heard of before, you're not even looking at the brand name half the time on Amazon because it's on Amazon. Like you're on Amazon, that's the brand. And then you're going straight to if you don't know who it is, you're looking at the imagery to make sure the product looks like it has some quality, and then you're going straight to the reviews.
Exactly. I actually talked recently. One of the events that I was talking about, I said that one of the pivotal moments for the shift between what we were talking about, the eBay to Amazon, is the customer feedback. That the customer feedback
Mm,
focuses on the product, not on the purchase so
mm,
much. And that gives people a lot of power because the feedback it's something that it influenced the whole the whole retail landscape nowadays. And I was just
mm.
mentioning my own experience that sometimes I wanted to buy something in the store. I wasn't sure if that product was good enough or not. So because I didn't know the brand so much, but I was like, what if it is not what I'm expected? So I just went to my phone and I found the exact same product on Amazon, and then I started reading the reviews, and I thought, yeah, it's not very good. So I don't need it right now. Like, so I decided not to buy it. And here's the thing: if you work in sales, right? If you have your product in the hands of the customer, I mean, that's almost like a guaranteed sale, right?
Yeah.
Because if you just need to pay now, it's the last step. So I was in that moment when I had the product in my hands and I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I'll change my mind just by reading the feedback on Amazon. And this is a major thing that is been happening, obviously a lot in the US. We also see this happening here in Europe as well. But I wanted to hear more, also your perspective, because we're starting talking about the advertising side, and we just had about a week ago from today's recording, we had the unboxed event from Amazon,
Mhm.
um, where they announced, where Amazon announced a number of key features focusing on obviously advertising, but giving a lot of tools for addressing reach, creative, accessibility, measurement tools. Also, one of the cool stuff that I think is that they introduce more opportunities for what we call non-endemic advertisers as well. Um, so some of these announcements, they completely raise the bar for marketers or advertisers in general. I think, in my opinion, they're game changers as well. But I'd like to hear your takes on the Amazon unbox event. I'm assuming you watched this. I
Yeah.
did. So I'm just
Yeah.
going to, are there any highlights, anything you think is worth mentioning?
Yeah. Look, what I see happening is Amazon seems to keep investing more and more in their advertising platform. And so I think what Amazon is starting to realize is that they have an advantage over Google and Facebook in that this is like we're different. We're not the same as what Facebook is about discovering something new because their advertising really took off because they can really they had these almost perfect models of what a user's behavior because they had so much data about the user more than anyone else. But that user wasn't shopping. The user was just living their life online, right? And then Facebook could suggest brands to you that you would find interesting and would love clicking on that you would never even think to search for. Whereas Google and Amazon are kind of more similar in that way, where Google you're looking for something, and on Amazon you're definitely looking for something. And I think Amazon is realizing that in an advertising world, the how close you are to purchasing, like your example of the sale, in the sales floor, the person holding the product on Amazon, you're always holding your credit card because it's always on file. Whereas Google, you're researching, you're finding out new things, you're trying to learn about something. You generally more upper funnel, unless you're just trying to figure out where to buy there. I mean, this Google is for everything, right? So um, it's not even fair to generalize, but I think where Amazon has realized this is things like Amazon Marketing Cloud. They're starting to expose these huge streams of data to technology platforms and marketing agencies that frankly weren't available before. And
Yeah.
I think to me that reflects kind of a growing confidence from Amazon that if we just show you how effective the journey is and how highly likely it is to convert from the consumer shopping point of view, you're likely going to want to spend, you're going to realize the ROI here is higher and you're going to want to spend more here than somewhere else. And so I think that has a couple of effects. Number one is I think that's going to continue to accelerate Amazon ads growth. I also think it's going to make Amazon advertising much more complicated because they're introducing so many new formats and products. And on Amazon, you mentioned endemic and non-endemic. On Amazon, off Amazon sites, they have Freevee and Twitch and Amazon Prime, Prime Video. So just all of these different formats are, I would say, certainly overwhelming to the average brand. And one of the things I talked about in my podcast last week was that it used to be that the average brand, it was hard for the average brand just to figure out digital advertising on their own.
Hmm.
Uh, I even think it's getting to that point on Amazon for the average agency to figure out all parts of Amazon advertising on their own. I really think that even the Amazon specific agencies that only deal with advertising are going to have to specialize to be experts because there's just so much change happening.
Hmm. I can say from experience, we feel pressured
Yeah.
because there's so many new things now. We need to catch up. We need to learn it. We need to test it, and then we need to see how we're going to present this to our customers. How we're going to introduce it.
Yeah.
Also, how we're going to charge for a service like this. Which how this whole thing comes as part of what we're offering to the customers. It's it is um it is challenging. I can tell you that. It's very challenging as a marketer, and being that's the space what we do.
Yeah.
We're very excited. Don't get me wrong. We always get very excited about whenever there's a new announcement from Amazon. But holy cow, man,
Yeah.
get us thinking afterwards. Like, okay, how are we going to do this?
I,
Right?
I felt the same way at Amazon Accelerate. I went out to Seattle for that event, and they just like the number of programs that they released from like Buy with Prime and like these sponsored brand ads and being able to push traffic from Amazon to off Amazon.
Hmm.
Um, it's it's just very
Yeah,
different
and
world.
I think you get the same impression as I because I mean, being with Amazon for so long, the last couple of years, I felt like it's the first time that Amazon has released so many tools, so many new announcements in comparison to before. Because before, obviously, there's few here and there and then,
Yeah.
but now it's like there's a bunch of things coming out, and we can expect even more next year. It was like, oh man, this is
Yeah.
they're just like flushing out, dishing out a bunch of things on us, and then we have to learn all this.
Yeah, kinda
And it's
even like
complicated.
you go back in e-commerce history a bit, and I mean, not that far, eBay was always the company that cared more about developers and technology solutions than Amazon. Amazon could care less about selling tools, and
Mhm.
partners and things. It was all about like, "Okay, we have the buyers, so we don't have to do anything. You're gonna come here." You know? The developers are gonna do all the hard work, and we're not gonna help them. And if they don't do it, then someone else is gonna get you know what I mean? Like, Amazon almost didn't care. And now Amazon has just seems to me that flipped that. They become I and the where I think it's coming from personally is, um, I think the success of AWS has really taught Amazon the importance of, like, partners and community and ecosystem, and Amazon tends to, like, cross-pollinate a lot of employees, and so even on, like,
Yeah.
on the Buy with Prime program, which is, like, a completely new program that's basically an alpha, using Amazon Logistics to power direct consumer experiences, you see, like, pretty high-ranking AWS employees on this program,
Mhm.
and they're, like, reaching out to agencies, and so it's just it's a very different Amazon philosophy than in the past.
Yeah, I don't know if I should mention this, but we recently been reached out by Amazon in Europe, where they wanted to develop some kind of partnership to promote the Amazon ads.
Uh-huh.
And I'll confess, I feel a bit surprised because, as in, obviously, this is more than welcome. I look at Amazon as a partner. Obviously, our entire business depends on what Amazon is doing. But the fact that they reached out to us, it actually started from them to start, hey, can we start a relationship together and see if we can work together to bring the customers and to get the best out of the Amazon platform? I was like, that's amazing. I've never seen that happen before.
Totally.
This is
No,
the first time.
I completely agree with you. Like 2 or 3 years ago, it would be unheard of for Amazon. First of all, for you to call up Amazon or email them and get a response, like, that's hard enough as it is. As anyone who's been suspended on Amazon knows, how how hard that is. But for Amazon to proactively reach out to you, that just never happened. I mean,
Yeah,
literally never happened.
precisely. And there are other features as well. And on the sense that we can get into. Well, the number one complaint I think every seller has with Amazon is the inability to get an ideal response when they contact Amazon for any, the Amazon support is being terrible.
Right.
And then I remember when we were watching, I think it was on the Amazon Accelerate, I think that they announced that they announced the possibility that you can escalate your query. And then when that was announced, we were all like, yeah, that's the big like yay moment for us because yes, that's, we would like to get someone a little bit more senior to talk about specific subjects. Obviously, we need to filter that and need to be careful, but just
Right.
the fact that they're trying to give it a little bit more attention to the seller, that was a really big thing for us.
No, it's especially because Amazon is so wide; they have millions of sellers, and I'm sure their first level of support is just overwhelming with how many people who don't know what they're doing. But then you
Yeah.
also have so many agencies that spend hours and weeks researching an issue, figuring out the solution, understanding it, helping Amazon solve the problem, submit these huge resolution reports, to Amazon, then all they need to do is say yes. You know what I mean? But there's no audience for those reports sometimes, except if you get lucky.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, also another conversation that I had also mentioned that because if Amazon is a very large corporation, there's thousands of people there, and every big corporation like that, they have inefficiencies internally. It's an internal struggle. And then when we have and I use the example, like I had one of the people that worked with me, and she worked at Mercedes Benz.
Mm.
It's a big company, global. They also have a bunch of things that is like it's terrible. It's you would be ashamed to think like, oh, is this Mercedes Benz that we're talking about? Yes, it is. You would be really like so immature it is, and some things that happen there. But it's because we don't have this close relationship with Mercedes Benz. If you buy the car, or if you happen to buy the car, you just buy the car, and if you have any problem, you go to a dealership or mechanic, whatever. But you never really get it direct, directly involved with Mercedes Benz. Well, with Amazon, it's different because with Amazon, we're directly talking to them, and there's a bunch of people talking to them
Mm.
every single day. They also need to look at their costs, and then and I'm sure they also get a lot of questions. There's just like, I mean, you can just Google it and you find the answer. You don't need to do so. I don't need to open a ticket about this. So I totally understand. And in Amazon's defense,
Right.
I get that. But I wanted to continue the discussion because since we were talking about recent events, anyways. We also had a Prime Day for the second time this year. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think. Look, here's where I think Amazon is trying to do. I think they have their main Prime Day every year, and it's moved around a little bit during the pandemic, obviously. But I think they had a pretty successful Prime Day, and I think was it July, June or July. I can't remember. It's moved around so much that I can't. It's one of those 2 months.
Last year
But
was June. This year was
I think they saw. Yeah, exactly. And I think what they saw coming was during the second half of the year, traffic levels are starting to slow down a little bit for a lot of websites, including Amazon.
Mhm.
And so, some estimates that I've seen, it's like Amazon traffic was off as much as like 10%, or just from people coming in because people were tightening their budgets a little bit and like reprioritizing what spending they had. And so that combined with the fact that Amazon's warehouses were pretty full. So there's been a lot of stories that despite expanding their fulfillment network in the past 2 years, Amazon was still has a lot of retailers had a lot of the wrong kind of merchandises, in their warehouse. And so kind of those things pointed the way that like, look, the only way for us to clear out some of this merchandise and bring people back to the site is we're going to need to have some kind of promotional activity. So to me, that's kind of some of the thinking that led to this kind of early access sale. And, you know, from what I could tell, it's like 50 to 75% of the volume of the last one, which, for something I don't think it was ever trying to be equal to the, huge Prime Day that they do.
Hmm.
Still pretty successful, especially if you're an average third party seller. Um, I think you definitely benefited from it. From reports that I've seen, but I think some combination of bringing people back to the site with promotional activity and clearing out warehouse space. To me, those are some of the prime motivations for this early access sale that they called it in October.
Do you think we can expect the same thing next year?
It's a good question. I think a lot depends on the economy. I mean, look, if you think about Amazon, obviously they have lightning deals and coupons and like lots of things you can do all the time that sellers can opt into and kind of
Mhm.
buy, be offered and buy access to. um, from a promotional point of view. I think a lot of it just depends on where the economy is. I think this holiday is going to be more promotional than last holiday. Europe is already like Europe is in a recession. Period. Like there's no one debating the economic situation in Europe, and there are a lot of factors that are affecting the consumer. Most of which is the price of kind of oil and gas and electricity, and the war and Eastern Europe, and it affects a lot of things. Uh, and so people were worried that first of all, I mean, some of America's economy is dependent on Europe, and so that's a drag on the American economy. That combined with the fact that interest rates are rising, and so it's getting more expensive to have debt um, in the U.S. And so groceries seem to keep rising. Like they haven't price of groceries hasn't gone down. The price of gas has gone up and down. It hasn't consistently remained high, but all those things are showing that like consumers are getting more choosy about what they're spending. Consumers are still the strange thing about the US market right now is that consumers are spending still. They're just changing what they're spending. And the job market is still great actually. Um I just literally read a report this morning that said there are on average about 2 jobs for every one person that's looking for a job right now. So the market itself is there. You do see a lot of tech company layoffs from people that have overbuilt relative to their funding levels, and I think that will
Mhm.
continue. But I think a lot of what happens next year just really depends on um, consumer spending and does it continue to slow down. Um, and if the job market starts to slow down, then that is really I think when we're going to have problems. As long as the job market is actually good, I don't. The U.S. may avoid a recession altogether. It will just look differently than before the pandemic. It doesn't mean there won't be challenges, particularly in certain categories, but I think the economy will just look differently.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of my perspective is a lot is being put on the uh with what's happening in the war in the Ukraine. This kind of sabotage that's been happening with the gas and the oil prices and all of that.
Hmm.
But economically speaking, my understanding is that we have a big boom during the pandemic years. So now, we had a big spend. Like that, we can see it. I think there's something they call it the pandemic bump on Amazon sales because you could clearly see the curve where the sales went significantly higher than the usual,
Right.
and then you see it slowing down now. So that's like in economical terms, this is a normal movement that we see in the markets in a way. But what I wanted to ask you is, do you have, as a consultant, do you generally have some kind of advice for sellers that, to survive these upcoming months of restraint or difficult, because the budgets are getting tighter, a lot of more pressure on pricing, I'd say.
Hmm.
What would be your
Yeah.
general advice for sellers like this to
Look,
survive this moment?
I think particularly for entrepreneurs, I think it first of all kind of depends on what kind of seller you are. If you're an entrepreneur seller, then likely as long as you have money in the bank account, then you think you're fine. If your bank account is going up, you're fine. If your bank account is going down, then you start to worry. Um, And so I think for that type of seller, more planning is probably needed for the next seasons because what inventory you have really matters. How much you buy really matters. Um, how much you're spending in advance of sales really matters because if you are investing and you're not seeing a return, or you're investing in the hopes that you're going to see awareness that then will lead to sales, then if that doesn't materialize, then you could be in trouble like pretty quickly. And so even big companies, I think, are starting to be much more cautious. Jeff Bezos on Twitter, he sent a note that says like batten down the hatches. UPS earnings report said something similar where the CEO, Carol Tomei, who's a fantastic CEO, just very thoughtful, love listening to her. Her advice was plan conservatively. Don't invest too far ahead of your sales. And if you see upside, invest behind it. And so that, yeah, maybe you might miss a few sales that if you had, bought more inventory and you might need to chase it. But the reality is global supply chains, for the most part, have kind of normalized. And so time in transit from your manufacturers on ocean freight, prices have come down significantly. Transit times have come down significantly. So it's easier to reorder now than it is a year and a half ago. And so if you're worried about being out of stock, that worry is less, than the lesson we learned last year today. And so I think that also favors a strategy where you are being a little bit more cautious and planning, maybe committing to slightly less inventory up front and then reordering more frequently as you see what changes. Because month to month, if the economy changes, particularly like if you're in Europe where you're already seeing like this huge mixed environment, consumers can change their habits very quickly. Like within the 3 month, we saw at the beginning of this year, everyone in January was really predicting growth throughout the year. And then by the time March rolled around, everyone had changed their mind. And that's just like in a 3 month time frame. And so I would really encourage everyone to think about 3 month increments and build sort of conservative, like plan for the year, but don't commit your resources for the whole year. Commit for the first 3 months and then reevaluate every 3 months, your inventory buys, like all your big expenses, I would say. Like
Yeah.
generally, but cost of goods, advertising, and supply chain. Those are generally your some of your three biggest expenses at any time you're selling something online.
Yeah. I think that's a really good advice because even though we have a long-term goal, we need to keep reevaluating it. And I think that 3 month space is a really good time for us to always like readjust anything that needs to be done, adjusted to achieve that ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And talking about achievements, actually, we're running out of time. Unfortunately, this is a really good conversation, and I wanted to continue for a long time. But before we go, there's one thing I wanted to ask you because we get lots of people asking us about selling in the U.S. There's a lot of interest in the U.S. as a market, and people ask us like, what. Obviously, the initial thought is like we wanted to sell on in U.S. We wanted to go to Amazon because of the things that we discussed before, because it's easier for them to start, is usually because they're already selling in their home country on Amazon. So they already know the platform. So and mostly speak English already. So they just need to adapt to the market. So if they have to fail, they fail fast. But what other things that you think brands or sellers should be considered when they enter in the US market? Because it's a highly competitive market. We have seen a flood of Chinese sellers coming to Amazon as well, and some categories they're completely dominating it, and it's hard to compete price wise. So how do you? What would be
Wow,
your advice?
it's tough. Look, I would say it's not easy. That's the starting point. I would think about Canada and Mexico.
Right.
That might be one way to ease into North America because it's not nearly as competitive as the U.S. market.
Mhm.
When I've audited Amazon accounts, even some this year, just the number of resellers, like even for a branded product, like the number of resellers in the Canadian market is a tenth of the resellers of a brand in the US market. And so even for the own brand and its own sell through that's established, it's hard. Obviously, I mean, kind of the first advice would be, supply chain is the most important. So can you use FBA or not? Um, do you have the right kind of products? Usually small and light, um, smaller than a bread box works best in FBA. And I think most kind of fast shipping programs for obvious reasons. Um,
Mhm.
and or have a fulfillment partner that is able to ship reliably for you for things that you want to fulfill yourself. And just recognize that, yeah, Prime is important, but if you can ship well, you can still rank highly on Amazon.
Mhm.
And so I think that's number one. Second is awareness is critical. Um, again, the fact that you're coming from Europe isn't a disadvantage from a brand point of view. Oh, no one knows who we are. What the disadvantage is that you don't have any visibility. Like if you're selling this product that has no reviews, it has, you know what I mean? It's like you're not ranking on the page. And so really understanding what is your angle to enter the market. So I would almost plan on a keyword by keyword basis how you're going to enter the market and just look at all your top keywords in Europe and rank them through a number of different factors. How much the page is dominated by advertising, versus like traditional organic. I think that would be one factor. The strength of the competition in those keywords versus other keywords. Those are all, I think, really important when you're entering a new market for the first time, because if you launch a product into a competitive category, you're going to waste so much money in the U.S. market relative to the European market. Uh, I would say is broadly my advice.
Yeah, okay. And since you mentioned those, because you mentioned about selling in Canada and Mexico, so let me get the other way around. Do American sellers actually also look at the foreign markets to expand as well? And what sort of profile do they have? As in, have they maximized their profit on Amazon and then now start looking of to other markets, or is more like this is way too difficult for us. Let's go find somewhere else where we can have a potential growth.
Yeah, look, usually it's about margin dollars. And
Mm,
where it's a trusted site and there's less competition, your margins could be higher because you could sell the same product to fewer people, clearly, but you could advertise less. And as a result, look, I mean, in some categories, the US market is almost perfect competition. I mean, really, you could spend a lot of money on advertising, and every point you spend on advertising is $1 less in your pocket. So I think it's less about the volume of sales in Canada and Mexico, but every dollar that you make in revenue on Amazon Canada or Mexico, more dollars are going to flow to your bottom line for the equivalent sale in the US. Um,
mhm,
even if there's less volume of units that you're shipping. Um,
mhm.
so as a percentage of your profit, it will look like you're shipping less units, but those units you are shipping are more profitable. So it can have a significant impact. Like any seller on Amazon knows, it's a competitive space, and even like 5 points of margin could be the difference. A pretty big difference to an Amazon seller.
That's awesome. I really like your take on this. That's more or less in line with what we really have seen and what we would advise people as well. Rick, this has been a really great conversation. Had a lot of fun talking to you. Um, do you have any last words before we wrap up and we go? I'm gonna do like this. We're gonna leave all your contact details with the video so people can get in touch with you. Once again, for everyone watching, I advise you to follow Rick Watson on both LinkedIn, but also follow up on his podcast as well. The weekly newsletter is really nice. It's a bite size. news for everything, so you can catch up with everything that's going on in e-commerce. But is there anything, Rick, you'd like to say before we go, or how people can reach out to you?
Yeah. Yeah. My consulting business, you can reach me on rmwcommerce.com. As Raphael said, you can find me on LinkedIn, just search for Rick Watson. And I have a podcast called The Watson Weekly, which I produce every week to really analyze all the news that's happening in e-commerce and just help people make decisions, learn about it, make decisions about what's happening. Like, how do we think about what's going on in the market? So that's been a lot of fun, and the response to that has been great. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll continue to follow you, man.
thanks, I appreciate.
Anyways, thank you very much. I appreciate to have you in the show. It's been a really nice talk, and I'll see you guys all next time.